Okay, we're live.
Yeah, it says live now.
I'm going to invite Jeff. Okay, I'm inviting him. We'll see. Invitation posted.
Weird. Oh, I think he's coming now. There he is.
Hey.
Hi. We're live. We're recording.
Cool. Yeah, I can't see Lorelei, but
Yeah, her camera's not working.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I don't know what's going on with it.
we can still hear you, so that's better than typing.
Right.
Very true.
Okay. Well, we can get started. How is everybody doing tonight?
Busy.
Yeah.
Yes.
I am dog sitting right now at someone else's house, so if you hear a random dog bark, that's what's going on.
Okay. So we didn't plan this meeting through, considering everything else we have this week.
Very true.
Right?
That's okay.
That's
We're here.
okay. Anything else we should know before we continue? We hear dog noises. We know what that means. Anything else?
No?
No. Okay. Did you guys notice anything in the agenda that we want to change before we get started, or anything we want to add? Or
No, I'm good with it. I think it will go good.
okay.
Well,
Lorelei?
Yep, I'm fine with it.
Okay. So we'll just review the rules really quick. I'll have myself kind of answer each question last. I'll give you guys a chance to speak before I wrap the question up, and we can have a discussion before moving on. Try to keep the cell phones limited. If you need an emergency or something, just let us know. Try to keep the interrupting to a minimum as well. We can have a discussion after everyone has a chance to talk. And just try to stay on topic and be aware of the time. Is there anything else you guys think we should review quick?
no?
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, we can jump right into our icebreaker. I tried to be a little bit creative for this one, considering our topic is conflict and task group conflict and how to give and receive feedback. So might get a little uncomfortable, but that's okay. So the icebreaker was to review your Whelan effective team member checklist and pull out your 2 strengths and your 2 weaknesses from the checklist in the back of the packet. And then once we share, then the other members can give feedback on if they agree or disagree, or just on any experiences they've had with the person. They can share their feedback. So, is there anyone who would like to start?
I have a question first. So, is it just one section, like attitudes and feelings, or is it that and another section is considered 2?
I guess I was thinking like 2 sections.
Okay.
And some of mine were like pretty tied, so I kind of went with what I thought.
Okay.
If I had the same score for them, I just like chose the one that I thought maybe was more of a strength or more of a weakness.
Okay.
Would you like to start, Jeff?
All right. So I will go first. My 2 weaknesses are attitudes and feelings section and intergroup relations. So my strengths are work and productivity and support and encouragement.
Do you you recognize that? Do you familiarize with that? Does that seem like that fits you?
Yeah, I guess like with the weaknesses, I tend to sometimes have a laissez-faire attitude. So I've actually been trying to work on that. So in intergroup relations, sometimes I tend to like try to get to the point rather than actually like do the group stuff. So I can completely relate to it. Strengths, yeah, I see that, especially like the support and encouragement that I talked about. I try to provide support and encouragement to a lot of people, especially individuals who are not comfortable in group work. So just to try to, get that out. So it makes everybody, feel better or, on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Lorelei, did you have any feedback?
Yeah, I think, Jeff, I would totally agree on the support and encouragement is something that you do. I mean, seeing that like in class, I can see that from you. Right, dog. Can you remind me, what did you say your weakness was?
I have attitudes and feelings and then intergroup relations.
Intergroup relations, yeah. And you said with intergroup relations that you sometimes like just want to get to the point instead of actually like thinking about the group and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I necessarily see that from you, or not just like in class and stuff, when we interact the most in that kind of group setting. Or I guess maybe I can kind of see it like in our last meeting, how we all did this a little bit too, just kind of getting to the point right away, like answering the question and being done with it. So
yeah,
I guess I could kind of see that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree with that too. I think for your strengths, definitely supportive and encouraging I see that out of you. And work and productivity too. I think you, from what I see, you have a strong work ethic and you like to get your things done and in a timely fashion, and that's good. Attitudes and feelings as a weakness, I feel like you're one that, I don't know, is pretty open with people, and I feel like you show your feelings and you show, the attitudes that you're feeling. So I don't know. That one is like, I wonder why that showed up like that in the checklist, but as your weakness, but.
Yeah, I was just looking over the questions and trying to figure out like how did I answer that. So like the question, I assume that every group member is trying to do a good job. Well, I guess sometimes I assume that people are just trying to do the bare minimum. So maybe that's what brought my score pretty low, because that was a 1. So
Yeah. Well, good. Lorelei, would you like to share?
Yeah. So my strengths were intergroup relations and support and encouragement. And my weaknesses were attitudes, feeling, and communication, participation.
And how do you feel those fit?
I think that they all are kind of strengths of mine, even though they were categorized as weaknesses. Some of them were. But I guess I could understand that attitudes and feelings and communication participation as a weakness, because with the whole participation part, sometimes I identify as more introverted, so in like a big group setting, when people are talking, I usually just like to sit back and listen and hear what they have to say, because giving my opinion is really important. So I want to think about what I'm going to say before I say it. So that might be why my participation can sometimes be lower. And attitudes, feelings, I guess, would be more of a weakness, because in groups I like to make sure that the content gets done first and not, so much the process. So I think that would make sense why.
yeah, and I can see that too, just from our interactions. Like maybe it isn't necessarily a weakness, I hate to label it as a weakness, but I can see that, but it's not like you don't focus, too much on the content that everything else gets overwhelmed. So I see that as, a little bit of a strength, and maybe it's just something to work on rather than a weakness.
Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes you said one of your weaknesses was communication and participation. I mean, just like being in class with you and stuff. Yeah, I definitely see that you're one that sits back and there's people in class that tend to speak up more. I mean, in this, I guess, icebreaker, it would be a weakness because maybe it was one of your lower scores, but is that actually like a weakness of a person? You know what I mean? Just to kind of listen and not always have something to say.
Yeah, thank you for noting that as kind of a strength.
Yeah. I actually had the exact same as you, Jeff. My weaknesses were attitudes and feelings and intergroup relations. And my strengths were support and encouragement and work and productivity. So that's the exact same as yours. I think intergroup relations, that was actually like by far my lowest score. And I think that's hard because sometimes I think group work is tricky. I think it's definitely not my favorite. I prefer to do things on my own. And so to like work with a group and, really spread out the task among group members and trusting that group members are all going to put in the right amount of effort, it's difficult for me. Yeah, do you guys have any feedback on that?
With your strength as work and productivity, I see you as like really driven, and like when you're focused on it, you do it and you get it done and you produce it. So I think, that is a strength. And, the fact that we have the same strengths and weaknesses is kind of ironic, that we're in the same group. But, like your attitudes and feelings, like I don't see in some of the group work that it's really hindering your ability to be an effective team member. So, it's just something just to recognize, and just take forward and kind of not necessarily beat yourself up over it, but it's, just a recognition thing. So.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say as part of your weaknesses, attitudes and feelings, definitely in class, like you will share your attitudes and you will share your feelings. So maybe it's more just doing in like task group kind of settings is maybe what this is trying to get at more with Whelan. Mm-hmm. But as far as intergroup relations goes as a weakness, I don't know if I necessarily see that, but like you said, I mean, it can kind of come up in different ways. So, yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. Did you guys, I guess you should say it, what did you guys feel when you read the icebreaker and you thought you were going to have to like give feedback to each other on things like this? Or how did it feel to like receive the feedback that we gave each other?
I would think it was nice to hear you kind of say like, oh, some of what I thought were weaknesses like can be kind of strengths too. So that was nice to hear. It kind of felt a little bit like I don't want to say anything rude, when I was giving feedback too. I didn't want to, hurt anyone's feelings or be restrictive, as we'll talk about later. So, yeah.
I think since we're kind of familiar with each other, it's a little bit easier to give and receive the feedback, whereas if it was strangers or individuals we're not that acquainted with, it would be a little bit more difficult, and we don't have we don't have a power dynamic between us three, so that helps, like we're equals, so we're not kind of, creating that power and control, so.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and we can talk about that point later too, because that's a good about conflict. Yeah, coming up with this icebreaker, I was a little hesitant, and the first one that I actually thought about doing first gave me a little bit of anxiety just thinking about doing it, but either way, I think being able to give each other honest feedback is a really good thing to practice, especially when it comes to conflict within task groups. So yeah, we can kind of transition into our action phase. And we can kind of talk about different things that create conflict or generate conflict. On page 12 of this book, past group book, it gave like a list of different things: authority, autonomy, attraction, change, power, control, and dependence. Instead are things that tend to generate conflict. And my question was, do you guys notice other things that generate conflict, or how do these specific things cause conflict?
Well, in my experience through my job, like power and control, like it seems like there's a lot of conflict just from those two things. You know, of course, like the boss is always, you know, it seems from the perception of the individuals that they're always trying to be controlling, you know, and control every little piece, and micromanage is the phrase I hear quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And do you notice that like in like your task group meetings, or like when you're all together?
I do see it all together. From a male perspective, like there's a lot of women in charge out there, and I think a lot of us males have trouble with that, you know, which is sad that we have that trouble, but unfortunately, like considering our historical relationships, you know, that's pretty common that women are not in charge. However, it's not a bad thing, you know, it's probably a good thing, you know. For one, it's creating, you know, it's not making us dependent on each other. We're kind of independent. We have our own ideas and feelings and stuff about the things. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that these different, I don't know, like factors that they cause conflict because they're very internal and very personal things. You know, authority, autonomy, attraction, change, power, control. And so since they're so personal and internal, it can be very scary to express them to a group of people. And even vice versa, if you see someone else kind of displaying these things, they're like, whoa, that's very personal. It's very like internal thing. You don't want to share that like with everyone. So it can be kind of scary to bring that up to someone, being like, you are like, you have way too much. You're using your authority way too much right now, or you have too much power. So I think that's why it can cause conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up a good point by all of these things being like internal motives. And what we'll talk about next is your motives being in conflict with each other. So, for example, if you are authority and you want to have that power and control, you know, and then another employee or somebody, you know, wants to challenge that, how are they going to challenge that if they're, you know, lower on the totem pole?
mm-hmm.
So I think I agree with you, Jeff. Power and control, authority, and yeah, the fact that these are things inside, and how do we express them the right way causes conflict. And so when you look at the focal conflict model on page 13, it talks about the conflict between the motives that one person has. So the motive of wanting to share what you're feeling inside or what you're thinking about, but then the fear of how are they going to react? What are they going to think when I say that? Am I going to embarrass myself by saying this? So I think those definitely go hand in hand with those issues being inside interpersonal issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
From that or agree with that?
Oh yeah, for sure. One other thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. One other thing that came to mind for me as contributing to conflict is difference. So I think that really these different factors that they talk about in the book, the authority, autonomy, attraction, change, power, those things, that they kind of are rooted in difference. So, you know, like power differences or change is a difference, or dependence shows kind of like a difference between, I guess, power in a certain way. If you like really rely on someone, you know, there's a difference in that relationship. So that's kind of one thing that came to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just, I wrote all those things down, and then on my next sentence, like internal, like I didn't think, of course they're all internal. Well, that makes sense. I didn't realize it. And when Lorelei said it, it's like, oh yeah, of course. And then, part B, my sentence has internal dialogue. So I'm just like, oh yeah, that it's obvious that, those all things are internal.
Yeah. Do you guys notice when you are experiencing conflict, like within the task group or like work meeting or things like that, that you want to say something, but you're afraid to say it, maybe because your boss is there or the person that you may, be kind of directing this towards, you don't know what they're going to think, that kind of thing. So I guess the conflict that occurs, I'm talking about the focal.
I always have this fear that like people are going to take it personally, and it's clearly not personal. Like, as individuals serving other individuals, we're serving them, not serving ourselves. So like I do have that fear. It's like, oh man, are they gonna like think that I'm talking about them when I'm really not? Like, I try not to make it personal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, pretty common with task groups is people get, personalize it when it's clearly not about them. It's about the whole group, the people that we serve.
Oh yeah. I agree. It's conflict. Whenever I feel like I'm experiencing conflict within, it's because I'm nervous about what someone else might say or what someone else already did say about, and something that's not fitting with me internally. So yeah.
I have an example. At my practicum, I'm at the Mayo Clinic, and we are in like small groups a lot, like discussing clients and discussing what's working and what's not working. And in these groups, we have like the doctor, the psychiatrist, and we have the psychologist, and then we have the social worker, and the head nurse, and then there's me, a little intern, and so a lot of it, like I like have things to say, like I want to give input, I want, and there's been times when I have said what I thought, and everyone, is like, yeah, well, actually, we're gonna go back to what we were talking about, and so now, it's hard to want to keep saying things because I'm afraid of being wrong, or you know what I mean, things like that. So
Afraid of their reactions.
yeah, or just to be like, okay, well, that was, I shouldn't have said that, or duh, what was I thinking, that kind of thing. So to just having to keep like overcoming that conflict and that anxiety of wanting to say it, but should I say it? Yeah, that's kind of what I deal with during our meetings.
Yeah, that's the whole process of learning, though. Like, you're in a different setting you haven't been in for, before. So, like, you got a different perspective. So it makes sense that you have, some input. But if they're kind of dismissing it, that's a little disturbing because maybe there is something they could learn from you because you've got this fresh new perspective, an outsider coming into this, agency or the Mayo, system. So I don't know, it's kind of disheartening to hear that, but it happens all the time. Like,
and my
what are you talking about?
Yeah, my supervisor after the meeting and after everything, she said, like keep talking, like, just because that idea of yours didn't work doesn't mean another one won't, like, so, but.
Well,
that's encouraging.
Yeah, I know, but it's still, I'm like, how am I ever gonna speak? So I guess this can almost tie into the next part. We talked a lot about interpersonal conflict and conflict within ourselves. How does that differ from like actual conflict between the group members?
How I understood it in Whelan was that interpersonal conflicts are kind of like, I don't like my task member because of their race or because of their gender.
Mm-hmm.
And then task conflicts were more like the real meat to work on, like actually figuring out the task problem and how to, like in our case, how to be a better, like effective team member, or how to deal with conflict and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my understanding as well. Like, I wrote down interpersonal conflict, related to gender, just from my experience too. And then between the task group members, I noted like in not uncontrollable variables. So like they're controllable. So like based on status and things that you have achieved. Whereas gender, you can't choose your gender. Well, I guess you can technically choose your gender, but you're born with that gender, so it's your expression of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when Whelan talks about interpersonal conflict, he does talk about the person and not what's going on in the group. So that's I think what he was describing, in the conflict between task group members and what the topic is and what how they are as members and not necessarily as a person. I think is what he was going for there as well. I agree with that. How we can transition. How do group member relationships impact the action phase productivity within a group?
I think if there's a cohesion among the group, the task group may be more effective, whereas the opposite is true. If there's no cohesion and people are constantly butting heads, like you may be stuck on the same problem for the whole task group a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
However, sometimes that cohesion can get you to like realize that, hey, like there's something there, or maybe get you to think about it differently.
Yeah, that makes me think when you bring up like extra cohesion, even like groupthink a little bit.
Yeah.
Like what I mean by groupthink is when like everyone's like on the same page so much that they end up like not considering any outside information, and they could like get in a hole. But I don't think that's necessarily what they were kind of like getting at in the book. That's in that like that page, so on page 10 when they talk about it. So.
Well, and when Jeff, when you just brought that up, that's what I was thinking too. I was thinking if a group meshes so well, then maybe they're not going to think outside the box. If they're all thinking, the same way and they all really click, then maybe there's not going to be that extra like push or that outside perspective to maybe take the group to the next level, I guess.
Yeah.
But then if the relationships between the group members are really negative, or nobody seems to get along, then I feel like there almost could be that purposefully holding each other back, which could obviously hold the group back as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. They also talked about in the book like tuning in with the whole group and everyone, all the individuals in the group, to make sure that people are really getting what what everyone's trying to do in the task group. So I think that is part of the being able to have a good relationship with the other group members, so you can actually keep moving on with the task group.
Right. So how does the ability to, I guess, recognize that conflict, or I guess Lorelei said tuning in and really being and listening, or I guess why is it important to exchange feedback, and how does that help with the productivity of the group?
I think we're all different people, so we all have diverse ideas. So I think just recognizing that and kind of understanding everybody's perspective could be helpful to find new solutions to the problem, or a different solution that maybe somebody never thought of. So it might help with the group or the task at hand, like solving it.
Yeah, I think it's just being able to recognize the conflict and to exchange the feedback, just make sure that the group addresses the issue, the actual the elephant in the room, and then that so they can move on. Yeah, so like you said, that they don't get stuck, and also just being able to keep things fair by addressing that conflict. If it's something that's kind of unsaid conflict, but you can really feel it, then it's good to make sure to give everyone a chance to talk. So you can kind of maybe bring up that conflict so you can deal with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I agree. Exchanging feedback. Maybe group members don't even realize, that what's going on, and if somebody doesn't say something, then they might not even notice, if they're not putting in input or, whatever the conflict may be, they may not know unless somebody gives that feedback. So that's why I think feedback is really important, because it will hopefully bring the group forward and keep the productivity up. Why can giving and receiving feedback be difficult?
I think it's hard because you just don't want to upset someone if they take it personally. Which sometimes you have to be really careful with your feedback. And I think they said this in the book too. Like, you have to make sure that your feedback isn't something that's like about something that they can't change. So it's like, you're just a really bad, human being in general. It's like, well, I can't change that. Maybe like you need to give something specific with your feedback and something that's more on my actions and behaviors, and not like you're a crabby person. So, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They have something in the book. Yalom said feedback is not a common practice or transaction. Like, it's not commonplace to get feedback, no matter if you're in a school setting or work setting. It's just not a common thing. You would hope it would happen in a school setting, like, hey, here's some feedback, your assignment, you could have done X, Y, and Z a little bit better, but you did something else really good, and that's the whole strengths-based perspective, is we need to point out like all the good things that we're doing instead of constantly focusing on the negative and the bad things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the book also says, but I agree with it. Feedback can just even the word, I feel like, can make people really uncomfortable. Whether you have to give the feedback or whether you're receiving the feedback, either way, I think it gives people anxiety just hearing that word, or like,
yes,
Jeff, I have to, tell you something about how, your performance has been. Oh God, like, what is she gonna say? And it just automatically, it makes people uncomfortable. And I think that's the, one of the main reasons why it's really difficult, because you don't know what's coming, and having to, maybe share some bad news with someone, or, it's hard. So.
Yeah, that made me think. I have my 90-day review on Monday at my internship with the director of my internship placement. So, yeah, I'm nervous about that because, it's going to be she and I discussing my work there. So lots of feedback.
Yeah, so you're like getting, anxious and uncomfortable just like thinking about how it's going to go. But I'm sure it'll be fine, but... Jeff, do you have any personal experiences at all?
Well, I did write. My boss kind of gave me a pat on the back, without literally giving me a pat on the back. We had a crisis situation, and he thanked me for handling it the way I handled it. So I thought that was pretty good, and he's pretty positive when he gives feedback. He does give feedback to, like negative feedback. I hate to phrase it that way, but he does do that. So you've got something to work on. The initial first time he gave me that type of feedback, I was like, oh no, like I'm gonna be fired, and I got all worried. But he's like, like it's just something to work on. He's like, we're not perfect, so. But it feels good to get that feedback, regardless. It's like, okay, somebody's paying attention to me.
Right. Yeah. So maybe feedback would also be a really positive thing, because if he didn't give you that feedback on how you handled that crisis situation, what do you think, you would have felt?
Yeah.
So,
you know, you always want to grow in your job and you don't want to just be stagnant. So it's kind of nice to get that feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. We can move on to the next question. Page 15 and 16 addresses the here and now issues within the group. So how do you guys think, how do the here and now processes fit within making sure there's open communication for all of the group members?
I mean, the here and now, doing that is just stopping where you are and saying, you know, how does everyone feel with how things are going? And that really opens up the conversation to everyone, and maybe to just, you know, for communication. And yeah, so I mean, in itself, it is 100, like the here and now process is open communication for everyone, is what it's doing. So that's, yeah, it fits very well.
Yeah, I agree with Lorelei. You know, it opens up the conversation and then it helps people recognize their differences and maybe explore how to use those differences to service the group goals.
Yeah.
You know, and then people would be more likely to, you know, express their beliefs and ideas, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this section of the book talks about, you know, just keeping the attention, like where it needs to be, focusing on the group, and how it, you know, allows group members to be flexible and really listen as to what's being said instead of maybe hearing it but not actually taking it in. So I think that's really important, and I think a lot of people do that. They just listen, but they hear, but they aren't actually like listening and internalizing what's going on. And so if members are able to do that, then it'll just make for a better conversation, or maybe bring up feedback that needs to be brought up in order to address some conflict.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, Jeff, you've talked about your workplace. Is there anything within your your field practicum that you've encountered any conflict or feedback?
Well, I did get some feedback from my boss in front of another mental health practitioner. So at first it was a little awkward, but you know, she was giving me positive things, and she said, "Well, you could work on this." You know, like I struggle with confidence, so she had brought that up, and she knew it, and we had a conversation previously. And at first I was a little upset she brought it up in front of somebody else. Mm. But that person, Leslie, like has seen me talk with confidence about certain things, so she's like, "Oh, you got it," you know. So she was encouraging as well, so that was pretty helpful.
Yeah. So did you notice any? I guess you said it was frustrating hearing or like being in front of another person.
Mm-hmm.
How did you like resolve that conflict within yourself? I guess like being frustrated or maybe anxious that there was somebody else listening when you were giving feedback.
Yeah, I think, you know, I've had a couple of conversations with this person on how to do the skills work, so we've kind of, you know, seen eye to eye on those things. So I respect her, and she understands I'm still learning. So I kind of came from that perspective, like she's not judging me, she's understanding that I'm still working on this, you know, and that I'm willing to work on it instead of just sit there and say, "Oh, I know all this." So I think that was extremely helpful for me. It still had a little anxiety, but you know, I pushed through it.
Okay.
At my internship, we have these weekly skill meetings for skills workers, and we talk about kind of issues that are going on, just things that are happening as like skills workers with our clients and at our placement and everything. And at one of our meetings, the director brought up kind of like an issue that another skills worker, I guess, had with the county, and it sounded like people were kind of talking behind her back about it or something like that in the office. And so the director just kind of wanted to like clear up any confusion about what actually happened, and was like, that's not her fault, and was really open about it, and she addressed it, and I didn't even know this was a problem because I was like brand new at the time, but it was, I guess, so there was like conflict kind of happening at my work within all the skills workers, and she was able to, in this meeting, like really open up the discussion for people to be like, she was like, does anyone want to like know what's going on, or like how she's doing, and that kind of stuff. So I thought, and she addressed it really well, I thought. And so people were able to kind of move on after that. Yeah.
Lorelei, did you sense that people were kind of ambivalent to her like ideas, or not ambivalent ideas, but like just like, oh no, it was her fault, or do you think they were blaming the individual rather than the county, or do you think maybe people really did realize that it wasn't her fault?
I think people just didn't know what happened. They just had heard things. So they heard that she was in trouble with the county or something, or got accused from the county of doing something. And the director was like, I'm backing her 100%. Like, it was not her fault. So I think that really people just didn't know and were talking. And so that, and then people were confused. So the director kind of like cleared up all the confusion about it. And that really like got rid of the conflict essentially right away.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, to like bring it up in front of everyone and to like have a straightforward conversation about it, just to clear things up.
Yep.
Yeah, because if that didn't happen, the conflict would still be.
Yeah, we wouldn't have been able to move on with our meeting, because people, were kind of focusing on it, I guess. I mean, I had no idea, like I said, because I was very new, but other people, I guess it was a deal with the rest of the skills workers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at my internship, this is just one example, but it's kind of a little bit similar to yours, Lorelei, where I think everyone was afraid to like ask the person straight up. Like, so that there was this thing like, oh, do social workers do this task, or do the nurses do this task? And the nurses wanted the social workers to do it, but the social workers wanted the nurses to do it. And so they kept like, oh, well, can you do this for me? No, you can do it. That kind of thing. And so it never got like addressed. And so the main supervisor in one of our group meetings, someone flat out had to ask and say, this is getting a little carried away. Like, nobody wants to make the initiative to find out whose job this task really is. You know what I mean? And so when it was talked about in a group, oh, it's, when the patient initially comes in, then the nurse needs to do it. But if it occurs, when the social worker is meeting with the patient, then the social worker needs to do it. Okay. Well, now that we're all talking about it in the group, we're all hearing it from, the person in charge, then it makes sense. And then nobody else has hard feelings towards each other anymore. And we're like, okay, we know our role, we know our job. And so I think that was one thing that happened at my internship, where just addressing it and hearing the feedback the supervisor had to say really kind of stuck with all of us, and we all figured out our role and figured out our place without having hard feelings against each other.
All right.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about conflict within task groups and how to resolve the conflict, and the importance of feedback exchange. How can we carry these things that we've discussed about task group conflict into our last meeting?
I think just understanding that feedback is important, and regardless of how uncomfortable it is to give it and receive it, you don't just accept the fact that people are just trying to be helpful, especially us as a task group. We're not trying to make somebody else look bad. We're just trying to be helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then I think giving feedback can be really good, and making sure that it's something that the person can actually work on. is for us to try and do if we can in the meetings, in the next meeting.
I even think, like when we give each other feedback about like our agendas, like I think it's really helpful. You know, Jeff, you said, oh, Rachel, I think, whatever letter, you could reframe it as this, so it would make a little more sense, or, just hearing feedback like that, or feedback on, the icebreaker or whatever. So like going into the next meeting, if we give Jeff feedback on his agenda, and I felt it was beneficial, the feedback that I heard from you guys. So what do you think, Jeff?
I think so, yeah. I think, well, the topic is the one thing I want feedback on. I'm just like, I'm kind of at a loss on what to do. I know we have discussed diversity, but maybe because the Kalaki book really doesn't talk about it too much, so that's something you can provide feedback for me. However, I could provide some feedback to you too, and kind of just bounce some ideas off you in the next few days to figure, if it's feasible or if it's way out there or what. So.
Yeah. Utilize us.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what worked well, or was there anything that you guys thought we could improve on for the next meeting, regarding just how the system's working or each other's engagement?
I think maybe one thing to work on a little bit more next time is just kind of asking like if everyone's ready to move on, or like a little bit more on process. Just like, yeah, that's the only thing I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It sounds like a plan. Yeah, because there's some topics I could go on and on about, but I don't know if you wanted to hear them. So.
I know. I was like, I keep looking at the clock too. I'm like, I want to, stick to the schedule, and I want to make sure that we don't run out of time.
Mm-hmm.
But, did you guys feel like in this meeting, or even like the last meeting, that any like conflict came up that we like had to deal with or handle?
I think more internal conflict came up. Like we talked about, the effective team member stuff, and kind of some of that. Like, okay, yeah, I had that more internal conflict, but getting your guys' feedback and your perspective on that was extremely helpful. Because like we talked about, sometimes a weakness isn't really a weakness; it's just a strength to be worked on. So I think that was helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, in the meetings, not so much conflict coming up, because we're just talking about different aspects of task groups, and that's, not necessarily, I think we're all on the same page a lot, so there's not too many like crazy things that you can say that'll make me go like, whoa. But I think a little bit of conflict comes up when we're making the what do you call these, like the agendas and stuff. So like, because Rachel, I was like, oh, what do I say for feedback? Like, I don't want to hurt her feelings, or like, is it okay if I like say this? And obviously it worked out well, and you said you appreciated it, so that's good.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say is, I know it was an icebreaker and it was made to create conflict, but I definitely felt it, and I think we all did a little bit. Just wondering how to say it the right way, or how not to offend anyone, or still wanting to be honest, because that's what the activity was about. But yeah, having to overcome that conflict and kind of just say it, because that's what the activity entails.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, yeah, did you have something, Lila? Sorry.
No, the dog made sounds.
Oh, that was the dog. Sorry. How do you feel you've grown because of this discussion on conflict and conflict resolution and exchanging of feedback?
I thought this was really good, just to really understand the importance of conflict resolution and exchanging feedback so you can move on and actually get things done with your life. And just understanding that, you know, feedback or conflict doesn't necessarily have to be something that's like so personal, like with myself, if that makes sense. So like being able to just kind of accept feedback as it is, you know, it's not necessarily a personal thing. It's just something that I can work on and we can all move on.
Mhm.
I agree with you, Lorelei. You brought up that example of your practicum placement and how that kind of like squashed the conflict when the boss had brought it up in that meeting. I think a lot of conflict in task groups could be prevented if there was that exchange of ideas and that feedback, you know, right away, instead of, you know, the rumor mill starting, because we know how that goes. Like, it just gets worse and worse and it snowballs, and before you know it, there's some inappropriate relationship or something going on. You don't know. It's just like, it really is stressing that feedback, to me, is extremely important.
Yeah. And when I was like putting together this agenda, I was like, man, like I really hate conflict. Like I am really bad at confrontation. Like, you know, like having to address it, it's really uncomfortable for me. So I think that I've learned better ways to address conflict, or how to recognize conflict, or how to handle it. You know, how to give good feedback, or how to stay, you know, here and now and process it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah,
Sure.
so I thought that was a beneficial thing that came out of this meeting. Any other thoughts on conflict or feedback?
No.
No.
So now we push towards the last one. Jeff, you're going to be the facilitator on April 13th, 7:30 again. Does that work for everyone?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't have any huge assignments due the very next day?
We can check it out. I noticed before we started our meeting, she pushed the date back, so we could check it out. There might be an assignment for Sky's class, actually.
Okay.
Memoir.
I
I'm not
was
too sure.
asked about that one. Okay, well,
So,
yeah, if we need to reschedule or whatever, I'm sure we'll figure it out.
Okay.
all right.
That's fine.
And, yeah, and regarding your topic, Jeff, I say we just use that discussion post and kind of throw in ideas and give feedback to each other.
I agree.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else that anybody can think of that they want to kind of conclude with, then we can all get back to our unpaid paper due tomorrow.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you for attending this meeting, and we'll see you tomorrow in class.
Bye-bye.
See you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.